Hey guys, it's Craze here. I wanted to go over another build today. I made a Dust Devil Whirlwind Barbarian earlier on in the season, mainly to farm lower level pits for my new alts and stuff like that. And when they did the buff to Dust Devils, it was crazy. So doing so much damage that if you see here, like in a 100 pit, you just run through and she's just eating everything. Does it just you kill everything in just seconds. So it's been really fun. I had so much fun with the build, and I've put a little bit of effort into it now that I figured I'd make like a quick little guide just in case anybody was wondering, hey, how do I do that? And there's a lot of guides out there already for things like Dust Devils, and especially for like Whirlwind now that it's been buffed. So just go into really quick and make a quick guide on, hey, this is what you want to do to level, and then kind of what you're going to need to get to the end game and in between there. So hopefully you guys enjoy. All right. So the video is broken down into the end. Most of the end of the video is me explaining in detail how everything works and how to level up. Here in a moment, I will give you a rundown of all the skills and how that works. But for people that already understand Barbarian, just kind of are like, hey, I just want to know how Dust Devils works or what you're doing to scale stuff and how are you able to do like a 120 pit in like a minute or two. Alls we're doing is the Grandfather. It scales your crit damage to astronomical numbers. So we're just using the Grandfather, and I'm stacking crit damage and crit chance on all of my gear. Now, I see a lot of people go for vulnerable damage. I'm trying it out. That's why we have Sapphires in my gear here. But I usually just had the crit damage in there, and I like to scale the crit damage up. So we're going to try out vulnerable damage, see what we think. I went with crit damage on all of my weapons. I see a lot of people go for vulnerable damage on them, so not sure which one's better yet. I've tried vulnerable mixed with crit. I just think going crit damage all the way is the best, and that's only because the Grandfather scales it with that 100%. So if Grandfather didn't scale that with 100%, I would definitely recommend mixing it up. But because it scales it so crazily, I'm just going to kind of stick with the crit damage. Anyway, build quick rundown. We're using these Uber Uniques: Tyrael's Might, Harlequin Crest, Ring of Starless Skies, and the Grandfather. Crit damage on everything once again. Here's the ring. Good example of what we're doing. Warcry cooldown reduction, crit damage. Over on the necklace, crit damage, heavy-handed. Very important for your build. And we're getting all of our resists from our pants. So I'll mouse over all the gear for people that are just kind of wondering. And yes, you do want to masterwork your Tyrael's Might for max resist all. On the hands here, we could reroll the HP if we wanted to, but main thing that's important is having crit strike damage on all of the pieces of gear that can have crit strike damage and crit strike. In fact, crit strike chance is the important part. If you don't want to have crit strike damage or you get a different form of damage, that is fine. Crit strike damage is not as important as having the critical strike chance. So get critical strike chance on everything and you are good to go. When it comes to your tempers, you're mainly just trying to go for either an imposing presence kind of situation where you're scaling your hit points to just insane levels like mine is right now, or an easier thing to get since getting +2 imposing presence is a little tough. Just kind of use your tempers for your resists and all those kind of things until you start to get multiple pieces of gear and you can try to get that best in slot. I use Fury per second on my boots. I'll say this a few times over the video. I just like it for ease of play. I don't like to have to ever work on Fury. I don't like starting maps with 0 Fury. I just like to have it at all times. As for the weapons, once again, I didn't go vulnerable damage on them like I've seen quite a few people. I just wanted to scale crit strike damage because of the Grandfather. And that's what you're going to do. So a quick rundown one more time. Crit strike chance on all the pieces of gear that can get it. If you can get empowered, go for it. It's much better. Once you have Harlequin Crest and Ring of Starless Skies, the only resource management I actually need is just on the boots, the +7 Fury per second. And we have got rid of Vocalized Empowerment. Vocalized Empowerment is no longer used for the build. And Vocalized Empowerment is where when you shout, you get 15 rage per second or 10 rage. We're not using that anymore either. So instead on the necklace, we put our Whirlwind. Now, to maximize damage in this game, I do think that eventually some kind of form of either Edgemaster or Elements, just one of the enchants on your necklace is going to probably do more damage in the end. But just for general play, putting Dust Devils on it, great. All right, and now let's get into a little bit more detailed on the build. But I just wanted for anybody that wanted to just look over it real quick. All right, so one of the things is mainly for leveling. So this is what I've been wearing now that I'm powerful, but for leveling, what are you going to want? Let's go ahead and show you. I think that a Fury helmet, which seems to be pretty easy to get, and Tybalt's Will, and then right here, Metamorphosis Boots. So the reason why we use Metamorphosis Boots and Tybalt's Will is because before you get enough Fury, it's going to be difficult to manage just constantly spamming out your Dust Devils. If you want to immediately experience what the build is going to feel like at max level, throw in a Tybalt's Will, which doesn't seem to be hard, especially in softcore to get. You can have anybody run you through like a boss real quick, and these will usually drop. I think the highest drop chance that I've seen for people is off of Duriel. So save up your mats for a Duriel real quick, around level 70, 75, which is when builds need to actually start coming online. That's when you'll notice that this is really nice to use. So if you throw a Tybalt's Will up and you have Metamorphosis on a pair of gear, this will allow you to just spam your moves. In fact, let me even take off my my ring here, so we're using more rage. So you use up all your rage there, and then just immediately get it all back with Tybalt's when you just use your Metamorphosis. There is other unstoppables you have. So like when I pop my resource generation, that'll immediately spawn me back up. And when you're in the middle of combat here, as you see, we'll be getting a lot of our Fury back anyway, so you can constantly keep spamming. But while you're leveling, if you don't have a couple of pieces of Fury back on your gear, like just having it on your helmet or something, and resource generation, it does get a little bit difficult to keep that spamming. So Tybalt's Will can help in the meantime. Metamorphosis, and every single time you use your evade right here, boom. Just a little tidbit for leveling. Anybody I've seen who used a character who's really heavy into the resource, I've showed them that little that little hack pretty much on how to use Tybalt's Will with Metamorphosis to get all of your resource back, and that works with every character. So any character you have that you need to get resource back because it's kind of like a hog, it just uses a bunch, you can just throw a Tybalt's Will on, and you can throw a Metamorphosis Boots. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, and that's going to take care of the whole thing for you. So that's what I would do while I was leveling. While you're leveling, don't worry too much about your stats. And this is a little key on the Barbarian for Whirlwind. The only stats you care about is critical strike chance. So critical strike chance on gloves, on both rings. If you can get empowered, even better. And you must have it on your neck too. So you can get it on all these pieces of gear. You're going to have enough critical strike chance to run the build reliably. If you get empowered on all of those, it's going to be even stronger. And then if you can get the empowered to proc on a masterwork a few times, it's going to feel amazing. Getting to 70, 74%, 80% crit strike chance makes it so that gushing wounds is just ludicrous amounts of damage. And you're going to be bleeding and just killing everything. While you're leveling, Unconstrained was my favorite for leveling. Getting the 100% extra damage while berserking was great. So I would use Unconstrained until you're around like level 75. That's going to be around 75 or 80 even. Around level 80 is when you can transfer over gear from your main characters to your alt if this is your alt. Or that's around the time that if this is your main, you will have acquired enough gear that you most likely have a couple of empowered pieces of gear that have crit strike chance on them. And you're going to be able to move over to a crit build. So go ahead and put those on. Re-roll whatever you can, and then you'll be good. As you see, you don't really roll. I can, if I wanted to, re-roll this maximum life into crit strike damage or into vulnerable damage or something. We might do that, but you don't really need to. While you're leveling and even when you get max level, you can kind of just get that empowered crit chance on a few things, and you'll be good to go. Now, the big hard item to get, you're going to get everything else I'm talking about. Like the Ubers you might not get, but you're going to find empowered crit chance on your gear. You're going to find a piece of gear that has resistance to all elements that's going to work for you. You're going to hit the armor cap. You're going to hit the elemental caps. These are things that are easy to see and to do. The thing that's going to be very difficult to do is to find a good necklace. So a necklace with heavy-handed on it is very important. And you don't understand why until you've actually made the build. And I didn't understand either. I kept seeing people with heavy-handed, and I was like, I've got a necklace with stuff on it. I was using this for the most part. It's like, I've got crit chance. It's giving me my armor. I've got cooldown reduction. I don't really need heavy-handed. So what heavy-handed does is it increases this skill in your tree. This is two-handed weapons. While using a two-handed weapon, you deal 15 times percent increased critical strike damage. So at first when you read that, you might just read it as 15% increased critical strike damage because you keep looking at so much critical strike damage items, and you notice that, hey, they all just increase by what they say. This increases your base. So what I've realized is that this takes your 50% crit chance or crit strike damage to 65% crit strike damage on your base character. And how I figured this out is only 4,800% crit chance. Now, if I was to add multiple items onto my gear that had crit strike damage on them, they would not even come close. I could have 100% multiple times on here, and it wouldn't even come close to what heavy-handed will do. Where heavy-handed takes us from 4,000 and gives us a whole whopping 1,000, almost 400% more critical strike damage. So getting heavy-handed on a necklace is very important, but not important until late game. And then when it comes to your tempers, once again, tempers are up to the person and how they feel like they like to play. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I wanted to have more HP and just kind of have like a bunch of stats and just be, I'm trying to push into the pits a little bit further, and I wanted to get imposing presence mainly because it's hard to get imposing presence. That's the reason why I wanted imposing presence. Now, do I find imposing presence to be one of the best stats in the game? It is for barbarians. It increases your life by an astronomical number. The percentages are not available to any other class like this, so that's the reason why it's very important to get it on a couple pieces of gear if you can. On your necklace, especially for a whirlwind barbarian, I feel like your rings and your necklace should both have Warcry cooldown reduction after having imposing presence on this. And the reason I say this is because if all of your jewelry has Warcry cooldown reduction, these Warcries are going to come up much quicker. And to be honest, when you're on a boss, something you don't think about until you've played the build for a while is that your shout skills create 3 Dust Devils. This Dust Devil modifier is actually higher than any other Dust Devil modifier damage, unless you put one on your neck. So that 3,400 is higher than anything else that you get. Most of them are usually about 2,000, about 3,000. So having your shouts go off on top of a boss over and over again, and the Dust Devils kind of auto-seek when you shout. Like if you see right here, when I shout, they spawn on the creatures. So it makes it pretty nice. If you can get your shout cooldown on all of your gear here to a pretty good amount, that's going to actually not just increase your survivability, because shouts are amazing. You're going to get your resource reduction going up quicker. You're going to run faster. Warcry is going to reduce the damage they do. Or my bad. Challenging shouts can reduce the damage you do, and this is going to increase the damage you do. So Warcry cooldown reduction is probably better, but if you just kind of want to have, and it's my alt, and if you just kind of want to have like a really cool stat screen to look at, I'd go for imposing presence. Or if you're planning on pushing certain content where you think this HP is helping you, which Iron Skin, the more HP you have, Iron Skin definitely benefits from. But just wanted to show you guys that. It's hard to figure out when I was looking through all the barbarians at the end of the game and looking through some people's build guides, why they were doing things, because I had already built my barbarian and I was doing decent damage, but I had barely got the grandfather, and after realizing what it did to my build, I just wanted to see what other people were doing, and I didn't see anybody really using Fury per second on their gear, which I understand. It is a stat that you don't need, especially when you're in the thick of combat, but it just is such a good quality of life for me that I haven't got rid of it. And the reason for these Uber Uniques, if anybody's wondering, like, oh, do you just throw them on for no reason? No, they all benefit tremendously from the build. And when you're on a boss and you have these blades of light hitting into them, it's adding to the bleed damage even more. So, really nice.